Okay, welcome everyone to the first OMR Architecture Meeting of 2022. As is the tradition for the past few years, we will take the first meeting of the year to have a look back at what we were able to accomplish in 2021, and then spend some time looking at some of the goals that we have for the project this year. As is always the case, it's not always easy to come up with what the goals are going to be. They're certainly aspirational, but things do come up during the year that will cause us to change direction or whatever. But we'll do the best that we can on the information that we have so far. So from a project perspective, there were a few things that happened here. So first off, we still have a very healthy rate of pull requests and issues being created. We were able to merge 434 pull requests last year. I should have probably provided some statistics on number of people and number of new people contributing as well. I don't have that information though, but I do know that there were a number of people that were new to the project that first made their contribution last year. We have two new committers to the project, Erwin and Devin, bringing us to 13 in total. So that's great to see. And of the issues that, of all the good first issues that we have, we had 7 of them taken by newer people and moved to completion and got their code contributed. So good for the project. So by component, I think the compiler was by far the busiest component of all the pieces in OMR last year. One of the main things that we did was late last year, Gita Koblenz led a design discussion around redesigning the vector IL opcodes. This was something that has been it's been on the plan for many years. We had our first discussion on this back in early 2018, and it wasn't until last year that Gita really took that and started running with it. And the idea was to figure out an acceptable way of re-architecting support for newer vector opcodes that supported different shapes and different element types. There's what we have right now is sort of based on a 128-bit shape, but as we certainly know from various architectures out there, there are other widths that we need to care about. Completely honest, a lot of this is being driven by the vector API in Java and some of the work that needs to happen for that. But the good thing about that vector API is that it's good for OMR in the sense that this project will be reaping the benefits from the effort that needs to go into supporting that for OpenJ9. So we had a design discussion on this late last year, and we came to an agreement on what we think we need to do going forward. So Gita is actively working on that right now. So hopefully some of that will start landing this year. We also had a fairly significant reduction in compiler warnings. So many of the components within OMR already build with warnings as errors, and the compiler sort of stood out. There were a number of, and a lot of that really came into the Eclipse OMR project from before from when it was, from before it was open source. So it really inherited a lot of the warnings in that did not get cleaned up before the code was contributed. So there was a fair bit of effort last year to tackle a lot of the warnings that were being produced in a couple of the backends and a couple of the builds, and to the point where the state on x86 and on Z, they got down to 0 errors, and we were able to enable warnings as errors on those components. So so really good progress there. Really sort of pushing some of that technical debt down and really addressing some of the issues behind those warnings. Um, in terms of back-end work, there was a fair bit of work happening on AArch64 last year. Again, a lot of that was being driven by requirements for Java, but again, the OMR project benefits from that. Some of the work that really happened there was around a full 128-bit SIMD support. So this is the Neon work. Array copy implementation, and many performance improvements to get that code generator ready and in shape for delivery in some products. We made a fair bit of progress as well on new documentation, really shining a light on some of the darker corners of some parts of the compiler in particular, and not only just technology concepts, but even processes as well. Like, how do we do things? How do you interpret a log file? That sort of thing. So a lot of good work happened there, and I certainly expect that to continue going forward here. There was some more work being done to converge the code generators. There certainly is a lot of similarities between them. We've discussed this many times in the past, and there are lots of opportunities for convergence. But it's a big effort. It requires a lot of coordination between the different backends, and many files and things like that have to get touched. So we tend to do things in little spurts. But last year we were able to handle a few things. So one of which was, and we talked about this in the OMR architecture meeting here, was really sort of normalizing the IL opcode evaluator nomenclature so that they all have a similar name. It's easy to find things and easier to debug that way. So that work happened. There were other aspects to other things that were changed in the code generators as well as part of that. Didn't list all of them here, but suffice it to say that even though we're still a long way from some of the convergence goals that we have, some progress was being made last year. There was a discussion last year as well from, really driven by Mark on JIT-Builder 2.0 and some of the ideas behind that, some of the motivations behind it, and even followed up with an initial code contribution and a demo of what was there already. So Mark has been working on that as he can. And the PR that was originally committed is still there, but one of the reasons it hasn't merged is because he's actively working on JIT-Builder 2.x, which will likely supersede that particular PR. So I think this year, one of the things we can expect to see is a bit more discussion on the JIT-Builder API and how that's going to evolve. We're also still looking at, we're motivated to look at, motivated by doing OMR releases. We started looking at how we can define the compiler API. The compiler is obviously the component that it's the most major component that doesn't have an API that we can standardize on, and that we can version across different releases. So we wanted to make some progress on that, and we did, albeit not very much. But there were some ideas thrown around last year on how to make some progress on that. So, but the longer term goal for OMR still is to be a versioned. Is to produce releases and have versioned APIs for all its components so that we can track things. So, and difficult to enumerate them all, but there's been lots of work happened by various people, various new people to the project as well, some that have no association with the project whatsoever, to take on some of the beginner issues and some of the more challenging ones to reduce some of the technical debt that lives in the OMR compiler. So, that is sort of an ongoing work. I expect it to continue for this year. In some of the other components, some of the major things that happened earlier last year, we talked about a port library initialization API for the compiler and JIT builder. This is really more along the lines of hardening the dependency between the compiler and the port library. There's a lot of we've talked about lots of that in the past, but there was an attempt earlier last year to work on the API to initialize JIT Builder with the compiler. So I think that work is still ongoing and unfortunately had to be shelved for several months. But there still is the longer term goal of making that coupling more explicit and having a port library ready to be used for various purposes in the compiler. Salman also gave a very good presentation last year on adaptive threading and parallelism in the garbage collector. Yeah, so that was a good piece of work that we were able to contribute there, and a really good explanation of how it all works and why and the motivation behind it. We also talked about we got a sort of official consensus amongst the OMR community around establishing a Python CI dependency. So giving us the ability to use Python during to do things during our CI pipeline. The main consequence of this is that downstream consumers of OMR will now need to have Python installed in order to be able to successfully build OMR. So right now, even though we've said that there's a Python dependency, unless you're building something like JIT Builder, it doesn't really get exercised. But we want to make that a little bit more solid, so that there would be problems in case the downstream project doesn't have Python. And the reason for that, of course, is we want to start exploring using Python for various things, for generating things during compile time and build time that we don't right now. Looking ahead for 2022, again, as I said before, this isn't necessarily an exhaustive list. It is and it is somewhat aspirational in some respects, but it is sort of a good estimate of what we'd like to do as of today. But things will change throughout the year, as we've seen in years past. So but this should give us a good guideline for where we are going, at least for the compiler for this year. There is going to be a lot of work happening on the vector side this year. One of the main pieces of work, as I said before, was the redesigning the vector.il opcodes. The advantage of that as well is that if anyone has looked at the vector.il opcodes that we have right now, they have definitely evolved in a very inconsistent way. There's patchy support provided for different architectures, for different kinds of operations. So there isn't really that consistency across all the backends. And of course, there isn't really any way of testing any of the opcodes that we have. So as part of the work that Geeta and the team that she's leading is doing is going to be basically revamping a lot of the vector.il work and a lot of the backend support for that, plus providing some quality control there as well to make sure that these opcodes are behaving the way that are expected to be. And yeah, just the consistency amongst the set of IL opcodes is going to be a real plus for all that. Some of the major backend work that needs to get done this year is full support for Intel AVX. That already started last year. It's just going to continue on into this year. It's a fairly large piece of work. It needs some re-architecting of the Intel backend to support the different instruction formats, register assignment, encoding, that kind of thing. So a lot of stuff has to happen there still. And similarly on the other architectures, just rounding out support, whatever is needed in order to support the new any new IL opcodes or any work to support the vector API from Java. There is work already happening right now for producing more documentation, where we've got some good momentum going there on shining a light on some of the darker corners of the compiler, and certainly seen a starting to, some of this is going to get surfaced to the project fairly soon, but I know that behind the scenes there's some work on structuring the information that is going to be documented, and make it easier to consume, easier to follow, and figure out what some of the areas are that need to be documented that aren't currently. So I expect that we're going to have some discussion on that in the architecture meetings coming up in the next couple of months or so. As I said before, Mark will continue to work on the JIT Builder 2.0 or 2.x API. I know he's got some ideas there on what he had in mind for 2.0 and what would work better for 2.x. So I understand he's working on that, and again, we can expect to see something at least to talk about sometime this year. Similarly, based on some of the discussion that happened last year, we did make some progress on the compiler API. I did have some ideas that I started to prototype as well. I just need to continue to carry those forward and getting it into something that can actually get into the code base so that we can start to reshape things. So expect that I may have some opportunity to make some of those enhancements sometime this year as well. And the other thing, fairly major piece of work, is to look at, so we have a lot of issues that have been created for work that needs to get done, and they're all added to the backlog, which is really great because I'm happy to see that people are creating these tasks. But the problem that we have is that some of those tasks are very, very large, and while they're good ideas, they need to be decomposed into something a little bit more manageable, such that someone who doesn't want to take on the entire task or has enough knowledge to take on the entire task or time, which is probably the most important thing, can really do. So we've set a goal for this year to really break down some of those bigger items into smaller pieces that people can take. Ideally, it would be something that can be implemented and perhaps tested and turned around within a matter of a couple of days, as opposed to something that will be ongoing for several weeks. So the goal is to really break things down into smaller chunks like that, so that we can continue to make forward progress. And on the infrastructure side, something that comes up all the time is automatic copyright verification. I think we just need to do that. It's a bit of a thorn in our side. So I know that there were some stumbling blocks to getting that done, but I think that we can certainly work out some kind of an OMR specific solution to that, and then just move forward because, well, we have to. The other is the linter. The linter needs to be updated because it was originally written to run on Ubuntu 16 and used a particular version of Clang that was available there. The linter, as it is right now, does not run on with newer versions of Clang. It's just a matter of re-implementing some of the APIs that it's using, so that's not a big thing. But the reason that, but I'd like to take the opportunity to use the to use the linter to also enforce the some of the compiler API decisions that we made last year. So we talked about using some code attributes to describe the properties of extensible classes, and we can use the linter to check those things as well. We can also do, we can also relax some of the restrictions that we have right now, right? So for example, there's there may be some opportunities where self isn't required, or there's opportunities where certain methods are never considered to be extensible, like where you get the compilation object or the code generator object, things like that. So some of those rules I think we're going to build into the class linter and get it enabled again to run during the builds, because it has found problems in the past, so we don't want to keep it off for too long. We want to finish the CMake work in the OMR project. There's still some of the a couple of the builds that are not based on CMake that we want to get done, and then to completely deprecate our dependency on auto tools. I have to swap that back into my head to see what work there is needing to be done, but I'm going to leave it on the plan here for this year. Getting more hardware as well, actual native hardware to support some of the testing that we need to do, as opposed to doing cross-compile and emulation. Really like to see some native AR64 hardware. As it's becoming a lot more popular and it's becoming a lot more prevalent, we should really be testing on native hardware. Same thing with RISC-V. I mean, we're looking for actual hardware that we can get enabled in the open source project. We'll see what we can come up with for this year. And as I mentioned before about Python, we really want to incorporate some sort of Python dependency into the DevOps pipeline to really solidify that dependency. And of course, before we do that, there's the communication aspect that has to go along with that to give known downstream consumers a heads up that there are some work that they may need to do. So that's all I have on the list for 2022. I know that there's others that people are going to be working on that are not on this list. I thought I'd put together just a very high-level structure of the direction where some of these things are going. Certainly want to open it up now for any questions that anybody has, or any comments on the work, or thoughts on the direction, or any other ideas that people have for the project. Certainly as the introductory meeting, we can also have this as a retrospective as well, right? So if you have any feedback or any thoughts on how to make things better or that sort of thing, by all means, the floor is open, and get away.
I'll say a few more words about JIT Builder 2, I guess, if that's interesting enough. Um, so the pull request that I opened last year with the initial contribution, I actually just closed. And the reason for that is that the state of the code that's in that pull request is actually fairly almost archaeological at this point compared to what's in my private repo. So what I'm going to do is commit in front of all of you here to come back by the end of February, and I'm going to present. I've been making some good progress on this, post the new year, which is kind of the best time I get to work on things. And some of the grander organization of JIT Builder 2 has started to settle in my head. There's still some open questions there, but I think I'm more ready to start having a real conversation around JIT Builder 2 and where it's going. So I'll schedule that for probably the last, well, actually, given the frequency of these, I guess it's the first architecture meeting in March. Maybe I'll schedule it for, if that works. Sure. And obviously, if anyone's curious to learn anything in the meantime, you can always reach out and chat with me. I'm happy to talk to you about it. Nothing secret about it. Just kind of, I don't want to keep bothering people with, here's what it looks like this week, and then next week come back and say, here's what it looks like this week. That's a lot of work for me and for other people too. But if you're interested, feel free to reach out on Slack or email or however.
Great, thanks, Mark. Look forward to it. Any other questions or thoughts, feedback, comments?
Are there any areas that people were hoping to see on the list of things that we're planning to do in 2022 that you didn't see? Or even just areas you think that we should be focusing on that we don't have on any list? Don't worry, I won't put your name against it if you suggest something. I'm just looking for ideas right now.
Well, certainly there's, even outside of this meeting, if obviously the door is always open, you can always open an issue or something, and
Right.
can carry things forward. So no need to put anybody on the spot here. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, I guess last call for any feedback. So I don't want to keep anybody any longer. I just wanted to kick off the year again with the with the retrospective and a bit of a direction going forward. So I think that there's certainly the opportunity to land a lot of really exciting things this year and move the technology base forward. So with that, if there's nothing else, we can adjourn the call this week.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Daryl, for taking the time to assemble all that information, put it all together, and to present it. Appreciate
Yep,
that.
no problem. Okay, thanks everyone. Talk to you in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Bye.